Calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Welcome indeed. Indeed, make a turn on South Bay. Word 'em up. Welcome to another episode of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Central. 4 p.m. Eastern time. Right, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, that's right.
Every Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And we have a very interesting topic because this is where the rubber meets the road as far as what the economy, right? It's where it's your job, your livelihood. It's that whole layoff thing. Other things can kind of be abstract, like, oh, the interest rate and things like that. How much growth is going on in the economy right now or not. Those things can be kind of abstract, but when it comes to people's jobs and the idea of, having to sign up for employment or unemployment or whatever it may be, that's when it kind of matters. So we're seeing a lot of layoffs. First and foremost, go ahead and click that like button, share the stream, subscribe if you've not already. We're seeing a lot of layoffs. 11,000 people laid off from Facebook. Lyft got rid of 13%. Some companies getting rid of 24%. Hiring freezes, so on and so forth. And first thing that comes to mind, and let's start with LAR, is do you think that this is just going to be something that's going to be stuck within the tech sector? Does it matter? Nothing burger, as some people like to say. In other words, just kind of get a temperature for, do you think that this is a harbinger of some wider systemic slowdowns and specifically layoffs in terms of jobs? Start with LAR and then MOT and Dr. Thunder.
When you count up all of the companies, it's about 12, 15 of them. But I think Facebook has the most layoffs. I think it's one of those things when we talked about automation years ago, people in the tech space are getting replaced first with automation. Now, one thing I'm interested to see in the coming 6 months to a year is how well the chopping up of affirmative action help when they start to try to rehire people. Because you don't have to use affirmative action to hire people. So I can get rid of all of these people, replace them with an algorithm, and maybe hire back somebody that looks like myself. You see what I'm saying? And can't say anything about it. I think in the gig economy, I don't really see how it matters. I really don't. Because if Lyft fires people, does that really matter? Because the people who went Lyft, they're going to do what, Uber Eats or something like that part. I don't quite get. But ultimately, I think it's going to make people take a strong consideration in the trades.
Okay, so you think people are going to focus back on skills, getting these skills and all this type of stuff, or you think they're going to get it this time around? But anyway, but no, we're going to get into a lot of the specifics as to some of the things that you mentioned. But MOT, do you think it's just going to be within the tech sector, or is this a harbinger of broader things to come with regards to layoffs?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah,
Can you hear
Now
we
me?
we
hear you.
can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So for these layoffs, with every recession, it always starts with the tech sector. Always. I mean, there may be interest rates involved with it, and then it's going to be the actual real estate companies that's going to have their bubble that actually pop, according to this. And then you're going to have what you're going to find out from most payroll firms. They're going to be making these predictions. So these things were supposed to happen last year, but all the fixes that we put in place cannot be sustained. So it's time for the pain to come home for those people that are in it. Now, for the people that are in the tech field, hopefully you didn't buy a house. If you did buy a house, hopefully that you can get rid of it because you're going to have to move. The job market is not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same for people who are highly skilled and highly talented. You may have to look at your Salt Lake Cities, your Nebraskas, your Ohio's, your Maryland's, all the type of other stuff rather than being on the coast. But these are, and obviously there's going to be a pay reduction in moving to those areas. That also kind of reverberates around the economy. So to me, looking at these cycles, and I make money off of these cycles that are very predictable. No, it's going to be a harbinger of things going to be getting much worse within the next 2 to 3 years. It should start in January, unless they put a whole bunch of things in place. Then they're going to put it off to the next presidency. But otherwise, it's going to be something that is going to affect people.
All right. All right. Yeah, and we're going to talk about the internal logic of why it starts with the technology and tell that kind of story in a little bit. But shout out to Solo. Okay. Thank you very much. $50 starting us off right. Says, yeah, too good to invite a brother. You F this and F that. Shout out to you. Thank you for the $50. Okay. Keep the super chats coming, ladies and gentlemen. Click the like button. Now, shout out to Kaiser and Empire. So we're talking about 11,000 people laid off of Facebook. We're talking about Lyft getting rid of 13%, others getting rid of 24%, Salesforce and all these other companies, so on and so forth, right? Do you think that this is just the beginning, as MOT has said, and it always starts like this with all the recessions, or do you think this is just going to be, what are your thoughts? What are the next dominoes to go down, Kaizo, and then Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, shout out, and shout out to the cryptosphere losing all their money made me chuckle really good
Yeah,
inside.
we'll get to FTX. We'll get to
Yeah,
FTX and now BlockFi because BlockFi was and Alameda. We'll get to that. Yeah, well, it'll be. Go ahead.
yeah. So okay, so with all these layoffs, yeah, as MOT stated, tech does actually start losing. Why? Because obviously you have investors who have to get some kind of returns. So if there's no market and it's not growing, because the issue with tech, the reason why tech is so prolific is because it's a growing economy. It's a scale up economy. So things need to be continuing without anyway to kind of sustain it. So I actually think this is the kind of perfect time for you to go remote because I think with remote you can kind of control your environment. You don't have to live in the most expensive area. You don't have to go to Nebraska either. You can go to a dusty village in I don't know Malawi somewhere where rent is like $100 a month, right? And save all the rest of the money as your buffer cash for all the hard times because they will come. Because issue, sort of, and this is why I have to come for Dr. Thunder as well. So Christians utilize this kind of analogy of, I think when the Israelites were stuck in the desert or something, and some of them wanted to keep the manna for the next day. I've never understood that. Well, that is how it should be. Why would you want to rely on something on a daily output when you can store it for the rainy day? So yeah, I say cash is king. Save as much cash as you can, sort of as a landing spot. Because imagine you have to move, right? Some people, and we already talked about the high level, the middle level, and the low level people. The low level meaning people that live hand to mouth. Mid level, they go like 2 or 3 months cushioning, and then obviously the high level guys who maybe have a property that they can sort of liquidate, etc. The point is here: if you're gonna be playing this game at regardless of the level, you do have to have a buffer, and that buffer has to be relative to your lifestyle. So if your lifestyle is, you are, incurring so many different charges, just be aware that at some point that's not going to be consistent. And yeah, keep the cash, I say save the money, invest it if you want as well, but just remember you got to have some liquidated, easily recoverable funds, and also always think about the future. Never live on the day to day. I know as Africans, descendant people, we have an issue with
All right,
transtemporal reasoning.
hold on. Yeah, I know you get into the prognosis and diagnosis, and you're bringing in bringing niggas into it and all that. Anyways, but shout out to Spiritual Logic. Okay, shout out to Spiritual Logic. Thank you very much. Always good to have you here and see you here. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Says great topic. Salute, brothers. Now, with regards to, let me just say something. With regards to the cycles, and then we'll get to kind of Dr. Thunder here, because there's a cycle of quantitative easing. Let's just say it, right? And in terms of both the monetary policy, and there would also maybe be fiscal policy wise stimulus and stuff like that. And these growth depends on money flowing in, the ease of money coming in, so that you can grow into it, right? That's the idea. Like, hey, I'm borrowing against tomorrow's growth. And growth companies such as tech and tech startups, which are very kind of, they're all about growth, as Kaiser pointed out earlier, and as MOT was saying, that it's the logical place for it to start. That's when money tightens up. That's the first place you're going to see it. Okay, that's the first place you're going to see when we get to the cycle of quantitative tightening, when interest rates starts going up, when people can say, hey, rather than give you money, whether I be a venture capitalist giving somebody money, or I be a shareholder buying something, or whatever it may be, giving you money, I can hold on to it, because as Kaiser was saying, hey, here comes the rainy day, or I can even get treasury bills and bonds like that, which now have a higher interest rates. In other words, money is tightening up, and you'll first see it in the technology field. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's another super chat, and then Dr. Thunder, what are your thoughts here about this coming recession that we've kind of been bouncing at the bottom of, and in a kind of weird way? 2020 and 21 were very kind of strange years. But shout out to Dottie Girl for the £3. Shout out to you. But your general thoughts, Dr. Thunder, about how this is going to spread, if it's going to spread. What are your thoughts?
Speaking of dusty foot Africans, I saw some footage of your daughter taking her first steps. Congratulations to you.
This guy.
Yeah, congratulations to you. And but all I'm saying is I've got my dad swag. This says world's greatest dad. There can only be one. So I'm just saying, where's your guys? Okay. Anyhow, so see, they only made one of these shirts. See, that's what it is. Okay. Anyhow, so yeah, I was at a rallies recently. I try not to eat at rallies too often. That wouldn't be that healthy. But every once in a while, I go through rallies, and do you know that the speaker that you order at was completely automated? It was like calling a bill pay service or something, when a robot is asking you questions, and waiting for certain kinds of responses. And it was very responsive, and it worked very well. Right. And then I started thinking, man, rallies is not exactly the top of the pile with respect to fast food places. It's kind of definitely bottom third. Right. So it makes you wonder. I've gone into McDonald's, of course, and they'll have the screens, and this has been for a while now, where you can, you press the stuff, you order your thing, and then you walk up to the line, and then they give you your stuff, right? You pay at the kiosk, all that. So there's that. But never have I been to a fast food place where it wasn't an actual human being that I was ordering food from. So that seems to be a sign of a particular kind of thing. And and like I said, for a company that I consider to be sort of bottom third, with respect to, fast food. It's interesting that they have made this move. And I'm also going to say that this sort of innovation, reducing the number of human beings that you have to pay, all of that stuff, type of stuff that they're doing, didn't seem to be a sort of secondary step or third step with respect to improving their image or improving the quality of their service. Because when I got to the window, it was still some ghetto stuff. So it was still it was still like somebody that was working at a fast food place. So it's not like they, eliminated one person's position so that they could double up somebody else's salary. Nah, they still got the same folks in there. So anyhow, I didn't mean to throw rallies under the bus like that, but yeah. So yeah, if that's a sign of anything, I mean, I agree with what everyone else has said. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is interesting. Things kind of swing typically, in this whole kind of a balance in a dynamic system. Things will swing in a particular direction. For example, Facebook just has too many employees, right? It's not a question of it objectively has just had too many employees in that time of free money, right? Where interest rates are effectively zero for people like that, then it
Also, I
behooves
think
them to pay. It behooves them to
I
pay a
think it's
lot of money
important.
to their engineers. Hold on a second, and to kind of hoard these engineers basically for all kinds of reasons, such as so they don't go out there and compete or blah blah blah, and give them massages and granola and all that kind of crap, right? But that was never really the actual cost, So and then that would have to be washed out of the system, along with other kinds of over speculation during times of free money and growth. But anyways, Kaiser, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I think that they're not really getting rid of let's say augmented reality, virtual reality type engineers, right? The robotics, software engineers in that field, because that's what they're sort of heading straight for. I think they're removing the engineers who are like dealing with data and stuff more for like their usual server, things like actual Facebook, rather than the actual stuff they're trying to get into. So it's more of dead
So the
weight,
point
really.
is, if they're getting rid of them, they didn't need them in a certain
Yes,
sense,
they didn't need them anymore, right?
in order to be profitable for a while now. It's not like they just figured out how they don't need them yesterday or something like that.
Right. And of course, they got to look at their stock. Their stock is plummeted by, is it over 50% the last couple of years? So
now, MOT, and let's start with you and get into this next round here in terms of like in your particular industry, in terms of the next dominoes falling, right? Because we know when these guys get laid off at Facebook, the person providing the locally sourced granola and yogurt for them and giving them their massages, that they take a hit. These guys are, the housing market we know is kind of in a lull, right? These guys are not spending money. The and so on and so forth, right? But as far as the next domino to hit in the transportation industry or any industry that you're kind of adjacent to, what is the like employment market looking like? Is it strong? Let's start with MOT and then we'll go back around the other way.
I mean, for the transportation sector, it's always been strong, but you have the rates are down because you have a whole bunch of people who bought trucks and who are using these applications to get loads. And when you have so many people who's trying to get loads, the price of everything goes down. Now it's very easy to just walk into the place and get your own load, but people are too lazy for that. So right now is just not a good time to buy a truck or a trailer because both of them are extremely overpriced. But from the employee aspect, there is always going to be a tons of jobs here because nobody wants to do this job. I mean, you got companies that start off at 100 grand a year with a CDO, but people don't have the lifestyle because this is a lifestyle decision when you come into this field. It is a lifestyle change and decision where the over the road companies pay a lot and the more specialized, more dangerous jobs, even if they're local, don't pay anything at all. And it's always been that way. So the jobs are there. It doesn't need anything but to have a high school diploma and be able to fog a mirror. It's the only thing that's basically needed to be in this career field. But it's always the lifestyle decision and choices that
Gotcha. So
yeah
you're saying some of these Facebook guys that got laid off may have to make this lifestyle choice and become drivers and get that $100,000, you know, to good. It's better than nothing while you're.
I mean, or they could start their own company on changing the whole game by basically making it self-driving and sort of being one of the first to sort of create the architecture for that, and
no,
people are going to buy into it.
well, that architecture is still 40 years apart. Remember, we don't have working cell phone signals throughout the United States. Can you imagine a truck going 80 miles an hour going down the street and all of a sudden you need to start it over? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
true.
So trust me, it's there. They're testing it, but it's really not a real threat because the brokers and the actual big companies who already are in the pockets of the politician would just dump a whole bunch of billions of dollars onto these people to make legislation disappear, or we would run the trucks off the road like people have always done, because it's pretty obvious what those trucks look like. So we're not worried in this field, but this field is going to be here for people who want to be a part of it, but the training isn't in like the rural areas. The training is in like the big cities. Like me, I'm from Mississippi. I didn't even know how anybody got their CDL, not even how my father got a CDL. Apparently, he went all the way to Memphis to go get it because there was no place within the Mississippi Delta you could just go and get a CDL. And that's kind of how it is now. You call up a company, they will put you up in their hotel and they'll teach you how to drive in 3 weeks. That stuff wasn't around 20, 25, 30 years ago. But again, it's still a lifestyle style change. So if you have kids and a mortgage and, you know, a person who you have to look at every day and pay attention to them like a 5-year-old, you know, it may not be a good fit for you, but the jobs are going to continuously be there. Like the warehousing jobs are going to continuously be there because if you look at most new construction in bigger cities, is always warehouses on the outskirts of town, and they're paying 25 to $30 an hour. Again, long hours, but hey, the money is out there for those people who want to show up to work. And there's not a lot of people who want to do that because they're trying to exhibit this whole work-life balance thing, and you need your own money together to do that. So,
Yeah, I worked in a warehouse.
LAR, you mentioned earlier the going back to the trades thing. It's kind of part of, you know, before I interrupted you. So if you continue with that and then also talk about your particular neck of the woods or your particular industry with regards to like, where what's the job market looking like? Any inklings of, they're going to be slashing, or they've already started slashing, or things are shaky, or go ahead.
No, like they're hiring, but they're having problems because I hate to say this and it sounds like an old fogey, but the younger generation lazy. Like they're the type of people that'll work 2 days and call in 3. And it's like it's not it looks good for the future as far as you know you're gonna be employed, but when it comes to like what MOT was talking about, with people wanting to do work, people don't want to work. Anytime, like Kes was talking about working remotely. I was looking it up. It's like in 2025, it's going to be like 22% of Americans that can actually work remotely and full time. And I'm thinking to myself, what about that other 78? Because what we see right now in most industries is people who, if I don't have a cushy, easy job that I could press 2 buttons and walk away, you're seeing young people like, I just can't do that. I don't know how to do that. Like, how do you put the bread in the toaster? I don't know how to do that. Like, with simple stuff. So I think the tech space, when y'all talking earlier, I'm gonna say it and I'm gonna shut up with this part. If you notice, they hire people like he was talking about. They fired all the engineers that were doing the data. Now they got all the people doing virtual reality and robotics. And guess what? When that's up and running, they're gonna fire them too. So if tech companies, if you notice, they build up their platform and their business to make computers run it, and all of those people are going to be unemployed. But the interesting thing is, those aren't the type of people who can go from, well, I did that, let me just go to a trade. So there's going to be a widespread, highly intelligent population that might just be unemployed, and they did it to themselves.
Mhm.
So
Now, those people, Kaizo, uh, if you're trying to program something in the NFT space or whatever, you're gonna have, not just because of this particular round of layoffs in general economic slowdown, but because of the particular bust that's going on right now with certain crypto exchanges. A lot of these people are going to be free, right? So you might be able to hire some dusties, because if they're getting rid of 11,000 in the United States or whatever, I mean, I'm sure they're getting rid of all kinds of people uh, outside the states, right? You know, and contractors of contractors of contractors or whatever, right? So, but Dr. Thunder, in your, I know now the way you guys are funded, I'm assuming University of Ohio has an endowment fund or something like that, and you guys don't really, you guys go through the ups and downs of the economy, or it doesn't matter. You guys are rolling with the budget you're rolling with, anyways. Any kind of tightening of budget type talk, higher in terms of hiring and such.
Yeah, you talking about the Ohio State University.
Oh,
Get it
my
right,
bad.
bro.
My bad.
Of course, I don't care about that at all. But yeah, it's interesting.
Oh,
So
but shout out to, I'm sorry, my bad on this super chat that I've been. You didn't say anything. That's right. There's no words on it. Just call me Brian. All right. The
just support. That's just support. That's what's happening.
Yeah, he's out here supporting, and he's just supporting. He's just called me Brian. He's a simple man. Shout out to him. Go ahead, Dr. Thunder.
Yeah. So academia is such that it's always sort of insulated from the real world. Now, the particular institution that I work for has been able to reduce its reliance on state money by a significant amount. So it's a very small percentage of the total budget that runs the university that actually is from, from taxes, where everybody has to pay. And part of that is because the institution has had, a lot of success in athletics. And whenever you have, successful athletic, athletics, a lot of wins in your seasons, going to champion, playoffs and stuff like that. There's actually a great deal of money that comes into the institution, not just the money that the playoffs actually pay to the institution, but also because of the additional sort of, television time, as it were, makes it easier for you to recruit and, all of that kind of stuff. So you have a lot of those sort of dynamics that sort of assist, but academia is since it's not sort of part of the real world, it's not impacted by this kind of stuff. There's very little impact, right? So even when the economy sucks, even when certain kinds of jobs are sort of falling by the wayside, the institution is still providing education in those areas. Now, universities, part of their role is curatorial, right? And so let's take a look at the past, right? There's a great deal of it that is, but with the sort of the increase in numbers of trade schools, that are actually sort of siphoning a lot of the students that would have gone to traditional institutions, universities. A lot of these universities have started to change the song that they're singing, at least modulate it a bit. So where a lot of these schools now are talking about stuff like certificate programs. You take a year, and you get a certificate, or you take these 4 classes and that's a certificate. And part of it really is a strategy to recruit students that are apprehensive about fully registering for university. And the first place that I saw this actually was in postgraduate degrees. So say someone has a master's degree and they're considering if they want to do a doctorate, right? But they don't really want to do a doctorate. So then they start offering these things called artist diplomas. And an artist diploma basically was the first year of the doctoral studies. But then at the end of that, you get a certificate. And then of course what happens is like, well, now I've sort of demystified this. So now it's like, hey, I can do the work at this level. And hey, I just need 2 more years and then I'll be done with this doctorate, So you're able to keep some students that way. So yeah, it's sort of like I said, academia is always sort of insulated from the impacts of these kinds of economic turns, which is good and bad. I think simultaneously it's good and bad, right? Now, as a freelance, we were talking about, somebody was mentioning the gig economy, as it were, which a lot of these jobs now, I mean, you have a full-time or you have, a series of part-time jobs, and then you have your side hustle, and everybody has to have multiple things going on just to get, what they would have been able to get, generations ago with one job, right? But now you have to do all this other stuff. Now, as a freelance musician, because that is part of what I do, matter of fact, I just got done doing this Wayne Shorter concert, which was live streamed, and at the venue that I played this concert at was packed out, totally sold out. They couldn't get any more people in there. And that's it may seem like that's a little strange, especially given the way that the economy is, right? Or the way that it's changing. Usually the first thing that happens when the economy goes bad, something that I've noticed, is that a lot of the live music sort of venues start to sort of tighten their belt. And one of the ways they tighten their belt is they'll hire a DJ instead of hiring a band. They'll stop doing as many days of live musicians. They'll ask the musicians to take a pay cut. They'll say, hey, you usually have a quartet. Couldn't you do this as a duo? They start doing all of those kinds of things. But some of the clubs that are particularly committed to it, they'll be a little more resistant, and hopefully they've saved their money when times were good, so then they can keep the momentum rolling. But I've been playing for years and years, and I've been using certain strategies to keep people engaged with what it is that I'm doing, if the economy is good or bad, right? So I've got like a bunch of stuff trying to insulate myself from the effects of the economy. But anyhow, I said a bunch of stuff, but the point is academia is not part of the real world. And so the stuff that happens in the market doesn't really impact the academy. And often it's my assessment that the academy is actually doing things to actually make it worse for folks, right? And then the second thing I said was about the gig economy, and and like I said, I'm a freelance musician, and there are certain kinds of things that you usually see when the economy starts to go funky. And one of them, like I said, is reducing the number of live performances, going with the DJ instead of live musicians, you know, asking musicians to take a pay cut, you know, doing stuff like, hey, this is usually a quartet. Can you do it as a duo? There's all kinds of things. Or sometimes they'll just totally cancel it out, say, well, we're not doing live music anymore. So, and that's what happened during the pandemic. A bunch of places not only did that, but they just flat out went out of business and they don't exist anymore. So
speaking of going out of business and not going out of business, and you had mentioned if some places are strong enough to, shall we say, hold on to have the cash to weather the storm. Kaiser was mentioning earlier about the hoarding of cash. Let's kind of go now, but let's start with MOT and then Kaiser. MOT from a business standpoint, right? You're a businessman. You're aware of these cycles. They're part of the breathing of the economy, right? I earlier on characterized it as maybe cycles of quantitative easing and then quantitative tightening, and the things that go along with it, liquidity crunches, blah blah blah. From a business standpoint, if you were given advice, from your experience, or how do you do it, right? How do you go through the ups and the downs, this particular kind of breathing where cash gets kind of cheap and then it gets expensive, or that kind of thing? Go ahead if the question makes sense.
Like what I've done for my particular field, this is why you don't be all over the place in 2 and 3, 5 fields at one specific time. Because once you go to the top of a field, it's going to cross over with another.
You're very low.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. All right, so within my field, I make people skill up. Like I make them go get their hazmat, I make them go get their tanker, because there's a lot of local jobs that pay a gang of money needing those certifications. Now, they don't really need it all that much, but at the end of the day, if we did need to stop doing the road because diesel get to be $8 or $9 a gallon, there is a place where I could put these people at. So what you do is you have them involved, and I educate them on where this stuff is going. So there isn't like any surprises about what's going on, because people think that they read all this stuff, they listen to it over the radio, it's doom and gloom all over TV. Is my job safe? Yes, these factories are never going to close down, ever, unless it's for that thing. And then there's places down south that still are not going to close, even if that happens. So it's like, look, when these things happen, this is how we're going to adjust. The only thing I need you to do is keep showing up to work and doing your actual job. I already got these things figured out. We meet as a group. We talked about it as a group. Any questions as a group, they're answered from the actual me, and that's it. That's how we do that. But most companies are not open like I am. Like when I was in the tech sector myself as a project manager, you would just find out that you're not on the project anymore because the project's been canceled, just like that. Like you're going to go fly a place and you're about to get your stuff ready to go fly from Denver to like Philly, like, yeah, that project's been canceled. So you never know because there isn't no upfront idea of what's going on. So you have to realize that you have to keep up with this stuff yourself. Like how I had to keep up with it, it's very easy to be open and transparent about it. But there are companies like this Facebook and whoever else laid off these people that wasn't real transparent about those people. Those people probably had glowing reports on their quarterly or yearly reviews, only to be escorted to the door.
Yep.
It happened to me. So it's like, but once you see these cycles over and over again, you have to stop looking at it as, do I have a steady paycheck? You should look at it as, do I have a stable place within this job market, within this field that I am? And if I don't, how do I plan my escape if this happens? Do I have the money saved? Do I have a way to quickly sell this house? Do I have a way to get from under this lease? Is my car paid off? Can I move somewhere else very quickly and get back into the working field? But a lot of people don't do any of that. It just crash and burns, and all of a sudden you need all this help. You got 10,000 different things coming out of your bank account, and you're pretty much working for it anyway, and everything is hectic. But if you plan your way into these things and you know where you are within the field where you're at, you could gain marketable skills so that way you could be able to move forward still if anything goes wrong with your actual company.
Very nice, the way you put it. So there's an assumption of skill, right? That you do and part of what you're saying and knowing where you're at and knowing what you've got is also knowing the skill. Like, okay, am I up to date? Am I at the state of the art? Okay, in this marketplace, because when things shake up, that's very handy, right? You can't be the lowest guy skill wise when when the rooster comes home to roost. But anyways, but you're getting into also you ended with the skill thing. So Kaizo, there is also with the hoarding of the money that you mentioned, right? Where cash is expensive. That's the general environment, right? Cash is expensive. Okay, so you the money that you have right now, or whatever paycheck you're getting right now, or in the next few months, uh, that money is quite precious because the flow of money is going to be reduced right now because of increased interest rates. People are not, speculating as much. Venture capitalists are not putting money out there, right? The stock market is not just funding, infinite growth and whatnot. But anyways, Kaizo, with regards to skills, how long does it take practically? Let's say you wanted to do the coding thing, okay? Because learn to code, blah, blah, blah. You can get a skill right now. Let's say that's the path somebody wanted to go with regards to, okay, they've checked they've assessed themselves the way MOT said, and they find I'm kind of wanting in this kind of programming department. And I think that if I do that, I'll be able to augment and then dodge and make all those degrees of freedom type moves that he mentioned. Okay. How easy is this coding thing? What would you do in that regard if you go ahead?
Yeah. So it would depend on which kind of programmer you want to be. If you want to be the easiest one to get into, I would say it's either UI or UX, sort of design. So user interface, user experience. And to get into that, the best languages will be something like JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. HTML and CSS are not really programming languages, but people. The real one is JavaScript, and you can learn it in within 5 months, 2.5 hours a day. 5 months. It's enough to get you through the door to get a job. Now, if you want to do something and become something called a full stack developer, you also need to learn a back end language. And you can actually use JavaScript or something called Node.js, which it's like an addition to it. So you don't even have to learn something new with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And I guess if you learn the extension of Node, you could be basically a full stack developer and within like 9 months. So 9 months, 3 hours, 2.5 hours to 3 hours a day, right? 1 hour, you kind of watch a tutorial or go through it, the way that you can, reading documents. 2 hours practice, to actually get the muscle memory. Because the issue is people also who tend to try to learn this tend to give up because what happens is they're going through a tutorial, but they're not actually implementing and creating muscle memories, then challenging themselves with some kind of mini task to embed that system. But yeah, that's like the entry level stuff. But if you want to do, let's say you want to look beyond this recession and you want to look into the future, maybe you want to become an AR or VR designer, then that obviously you need the basics, but now you need to start thinking, long term. Okay, I might need to learn something called Unity for game development. Or if you are like solo TV84 and you believe in Web 3.0 and you put all your money and you lost 70% of it in the crypto game, you might want to go and learn something again like JavaScript, HTML, CSS will help you to actually build the apps, but you need to learn a programming language called Solidity, which is where most of the smart contracts are made on the Ethereum network. So that again is going to take you 2 hours a day practice. In 6 months, you'll have the skill. So if you do all of it at the same time, so
Okay,
let's say,
cool. Yeah, so initially you have 5 months for the basic, I believe, JavaScript type level type stuff, and then you went to full stack, and that was like 9 months. And this is all like 2.5
now you want
hours
to be
a
a
day.
blockchain developer, 1.2
Solidity.
years.
Okay.
1.2
year
years
and
is
a half.
enough.
1.2. Okay.
Okay, 1.5 for the average person. 1.2
Okay, and obviously
years.
this is you're having a busy, you're doing other things obviously because this
Of course, this
so
is only 3 hours.
the rest of your day is not going to be occupied with this stuff.
Yeah,
When you say
this is
2.5 hours, that's it. Not like
2.5, 3 hours max a day. 1.2 to 1.5 years, you're more than good enough for the job. Just remember that you have to stratify your time between practice to majority of the time, and then also learning tutorials the other component of the time. Yeah, that's it. Once you do that, what you can do now, you could do what MOT is doing. Instead of being a cog in the machine, you could be developing the next apps for decentralized applications for this Web 3.0, instead of just being sort of like a cog in the wheel being employed. So then you can actually go ahead and etc. So I would say learn a skill for the future, because it's one of those things where we said it before. Like when I was young, I was learning C++ when I was 12, and I should have learned it properly. In the end, I didn't. Right, I got bored, so I only became a dusty, JavaScript programmer instead. But the point is, this is the future. You have to be able to look beyond the current steps. Cryptology is the future. Forget the whole finance component, even though that's really important. Just the fact that you can have verifications, no censorship, and all that kind of stuff. Even the dollar will be actually moved through the decentralized platforms. So you don't even have to worry about this pseudo cryptocurrency stuff. This is the future just for normal currency.
100%, 100%. Okay, so in continuing with what you're saying, and then I'm gonna ask you a question here, Dr. Thunder. The idea of learning the skill now is because this is the time when you hunker down and you're building something of an asset, a skill, a system, a way of kind of bettering yourself, making yourself stand out more, so that you can be first in line when the spigot opens again. I mean, obviously, it could all go to hell and America sinks down to the bottom. And yeah, sure, that could happen. Okay, but then you have different problems. Okay, but if you assume that things will kind of swing in the right direction, have things correct themselves, right, and then there may be some more quantitative ease, or cash will loosen up again, all that kind of stuff. You want to be the person ready with the skill, right? When the freaking granola bar starts delivering back again, to Market Street, to the Twitter people, okay, and the local yogurt and inflated salaries, you want to be there ready with the skills. You want to be there as part of the supply chain that is reliable, if you will, and buttoned up. But Dr. Thunder, do you tell your students anything, and maybe you can rehash these with regards to how to get past economic times, hard economic times, as an artist going out there, you're gigging and you're trying to do certain things. I don't know what the structure is. You can build the structure and then talk about what one needs to do. MOT was talking about, well, what degrees of freedom do you have, right? Can I do this? How do I escape? Is this stable? What other platforms can I go to? How do I build these platforms? What do you tell your students with regards to your particular field?
Yeah. So first of all, let's have everyone mute. Everyone mute unless you're talking right now. We're getting some noise and stuff. So here is I mean this is what I tell my students. I have so first of all, I tell my saxophone students, I tell them if they play saxophone, that means that they play flute and clarinet also. And the reason I tell them that is because if you actually want to work, then flute and clarinet are going to be great assets to you, right? For instance, I've done a lot of musicals. I've played a lot of musicals, and you can't sit in the woodwind chair unless you play not just saxophone but flute and clarinet also, right? And matter of fact, if you were to go to New York, for instance, Broadway, now that sort of industry has shrunk significantly as far as having live musicians in the pit now. But if you were going to work, then gaining the capability of playing double reeds, not just single reeds, but double reeds. So a single reed instruments like saxophone or clarinet, where there's one reed and the reed is on a mouthpiece. A double reed is like an oboe or a bassoon, where two reeds are attached together. All right. And that's how the vibration is created, embouchure in the two reeds. So those are double reeds. Now, it is not usual that someone that plays woodwinds, saxophone, flute, clarinet, can also play oboe or bassoon. So the folks that are able to do that are able to take all of the gigs, all of the musicals where they have one woodwind book, or they have two woodwind books. One of them is for the guy that plays saxophone, flute, and clarinet, and whatever, and the other one would be like saxophone, flute, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, whatever, right? And that guy gets broke off. That guy makes the money. on that gig because that's the unusual person. But the reason why a lot of folks don't do that is because it's a lot of work. It's hard. I mean, there's a reason why, because the usual person, they get to a certain level and then they want to coast. And they don't want to have to do the hard work to reinvent themselves or to gain new skills. In
Gain
these
of function research. I don't know why that just came to mind, but a little viral joke over there. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, but the reason that people don't do it is, like I said, is because they're lazy. And if people would do that, these sort of recessions, these kind of periods would basically present themselves as opportunities for you to gain more skills, to make you less susceptible to
Hmm?
being homeless or something like that in the next financial downturn, right? See, I have my whole career, I have constantly been picking up new skills. Every chance I get, I'm picking up new skills. So it's not just about playing a lot of instruments. I play a lot of instruments, and I play those instruments not just because of the utility that it provides, but also because I actually enjoy those instruments. Okay. So that is that there. But I also recognize that if I didn't play certain instruments, that I wouldn't have a gig. I'm a church musician. That's one of the things that I do. And playing at church, I'm playing bass. Now, I didn't play bass. That was one of the later instruments that I picked up, right? And if I didn't play bass in an institution where basically the rhythm section is going to be safe, it's the horns that are going to get cut when the when the recession comes. The horn section loses their job. So if all I play is saxophone, then I'm not going to have a gig at church. But if I play bass, or better yet, if I play keyboard,
Run to the back, run to the right there with the drummer and the bass. Those are the last to go.
that's right. Or especially if you play keyboard, then okay, now you can have a gig. And I play keyboard well enough to play, to play in church and to facilitate my writing and stuff like that. I don't tout my keyboard playing. It's not the thing I do primarily, but it's something that I do well enough that if I'm in a bind and my pinch, I can take a gig, right? So you have to have these skills, and then also stuff like writing music, understanding the computer-based technology as far as recording, editing music, producing stuff. I just recently took a musical director position for somebody's production, right? And so because I have the computer skills, I can do that. I also took a gig recently to write a bunch of string parts, write some arrangements for some Christmas, at a church, some Christmas Eve for a Christmas Eve service, right? So I don't play violin, I don't play cello or something, but I can write for them, right? And I booked all the string players because it's a multi-campus kind of church, so they need multiple string players at different campuses, right? So, and I'm going to be playing at another church at the same time that's happening. I'm not even going to be there, right? I wrote the stuff, I booked the stuff, and then I'm going to be somewhere else, right? So
Yeah, one level right above the skill thing is to get to the leveraging of labor, right?
Yep.
Because in that game that we've kind of started out here where MOT described it as I'm in this box right now, it's good right now, but what if and there's never any permanent box, right? No matter what your economic situation is, you're always like, okay, what's the next? How can I diversify, reiterate, reinvent myself? Because even companies, right? They don't just last forever based on one trick, right? You gotta, first is the Mac, and then okay, it's got to be the iPhone, or otherwise you'll disappear, right? Kodak and many other companies come to mind, right? When it comes to not being able to do the next trick, right? Or fumbling the ball with regards to that. But that's a very good point. But just the level above the whole skills thing is when you start leveraging the labor, and things such as writing is that beginning of leveraging, right? Because leveraging intellectual property, it can be distributed and other people can play it. But
Now, I'll tell you one of the reasons why a lot of musicians don't they don't ever get to that leveraging other people's skills level, is because they're so sort of in love with the creative process. Now, I'm not going to say that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I will say that folks often would be better off if they started outsourcing some of the writing, right? Because that would give them the opportunity to take on more projects. But since they want to have their hands actually involved in the creative process, that it sort of limits them from being able to, sort of fully exploit the market, as it were. I'm willing to hire other people. I don't need to. Me personally, I don't have to have credit for all of the creative stuff. I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. I like to be involved. I like to, whatever, but I don't have to be. And, so yeah, I mean, so those are basically the kind of things that I talk to them about. And then of course I tell them, you got to get basic skills like everybody else does, like everybody else has computer skills. You may not need a website anymore. I used to tell them always that they need a website, but they may not need a website, but they at least need to be able to take, to use their social media for something more profound than posting cat videos. You need to be very, very laser focused on whatever it is that you're trying to do. Use what it is that you have at your disposal, whatever free resources, to point towards that, and then of course I give them like a list of like, you need to have these clothes, you need to have a black suit, you need to have these kind of shoes, you need to be, I'll tell them all that kind of stuff also, so that they show up to the gig representing themselves well. They're professionals, they're on time, they're always prepared, all that kind of stuff. That almost goes without saying, though, as LAR was mentioning, you can't really not say that to younger folks because they really don't have a clue.
Now, speaking of these particular cycles, okay, liquidity crunches of all kinds, and if we all lived to see 2008, remember Lehman Brothers or something like that, and that was a liquidity crunch. This week, okay, there's a company called FTX and Alameda Research. Alameda Research is a hedge fund in this kind of crypto space. Both companies are owned by this guy called Sam Bankman-Fried, okay, or Freer or something, right? Sam Bankman-Fried, and he is having some issues with regards to his liquidity and then insolvency and then fraud issues. So we're gonna play a little bit of this. We're gonna laugh at Solo TV84 and ask him how much he lost if he was indeed in FTX exchange or, shall we say, the other one, BlockFi now. And by the way, these are particular centralized institutions, right, that just happen to do things that made them insolvent, right? Just like a bank or any other kind of business doing something. So it has nothing to do with cryptocurrency or even the underlying, shall we say, blockchain type stuff, as Kaiser was saying earlier. But this is funny. Anyways, let me see here. That's not muted. And let me know if you guys can hear it.
Last time we spoke, FTX, one of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world, was in deep trouble. And their biggest competitor, Binance, was planning to buy them out for a bailout. Now, initially, this was believed to be a short-term issue only for FTX. CZ, their competitor, called it a significant liquidity crunch. This basically means FTX had the money, just they didn't have it right now. To make an analogy, imagine I owed you cash but only had gold. That's a liquidity crunch. I can't just give you gold. I have to go sell it first. But crucially, I have the money. It's just locked up. Now, depending on how hard it is to immediately sell, this small issue can turn into a very big one, which FTX figured out when $5 billion in withdrawals came in one day, and they just didn't have the money. And so that's what this buyout was all about. Binance stepped in and said, hey, we'll cover their short-term issue in exchange for buying out their long-term assets for pennies on the dollar, which is a pretty brilliant move when you consider that Binance's CEO kind of caused the whole problem in the first place. Which if you want to know more about that, you can go watch our last video. However, I told you guys in that video that this buyout was kind of shaky at best because it was non-binding, which meant at any point, Binance could just walk away if they didn't like what they saw. And that's exactly what happened. Binance recently said they're walking away from the deal and that the reason was based around latest news reports regarding mishandled customer funds and alleged U.S.
Before we move on here a second, I just want to mention a particular kind of a point, okay? A side point here about what this guy, CZ, the Chinese owner of Binance, did to this guy, right? So this Sam Bankman-Fried, whom, you know, they're about to continue roasting here in a second, was having quote-unquote liquidity issues, which turned out to be insolvency issues, and then turned out to be insolvency because of fraud issues, right? This guy from Binance says, okay, I'll buy you out. And they've been competitors for a while, right? So, and then publicly said, you publicly announced, I'll buy you out. Probably the other guy was thinking, okay, cool, we can just kind of sweep this under the rug or whatever. And then came out and said, hey, I'm pulling out because, yeah, there's all kinds of, I noticed all kinds of investigations going on with your company. And then that caused a quote unquote run on the bank. People were like, whoa, what's going on with FTX? That's kind of part of the story there. I just wanted to kind of point that out in terms of this particular tactic that his opponent did here. Anyways,
binding, which meant at any point, Binance could just walk away if they didn't like what they saw. And that's exactly what happened. Binance recently said they're walking away from the deal and that the reason was based around latest news reports regarding mishandled customer funds and alleged U.S. agency investigations. And this absolutely ruined FTX's credibility overnight because all of a sudden the conversation around FTX turned from liquidity crunch to insolvency and fraud. Because look, there's a big difference between the two. Liquidity issues is when I don't have the cash for you right now, but I have the assets somewhere. Insolvency is when I don't have the cash and I have nothing else either. So if FTX was illiquid, it's a great deal. If FTX is insolvent, it's a nightmare, which is why a lot of people thought Binance backed out of the deal, with both Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal reporting a multi-billion-dollar shortfall. Now, Binance responded to this saying that the issues are beyond our control or ability to help. And this is very bad news for FTX. It's bad news for all of crypto because your average investor is about to get wrecked. Not only that, the CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, may be in a lot of trouble because it turns out he was lying to everyone when he said that FTX is fine and that FTX had funds to cover all client holdings. He said this basically minutes before disaster.
When you're regulated the way he is, when you're in a particular category, you can't be doing, you got to hold one-to-one, you know, the client funds. You even if you go bankrupt, you still have the fund. You can't be. So what he did is he took money from FTX to fund his hedge fund, Alameda, when they were going through a particular crazy stuff, right? So he has these two companies, Alameda, which is a hedge fund, and then he has FTX, which is an exchange. And he was a billionaire, the youngest billionaire ever, and he was doing some kind of crazy stuff. And then he crossed the line when he decided to bail out one of his companies using customer funds in his other company to the tune of billions of dollars, right? So he was on that high rope there. But I wanted to kind of see. But let me play a little bit more, and then we'll get you guys' reaction. Perhaps, you know, starting with LAR here and MOT. Yeah.
Now, he has since deleted those tweets, which might be a good idea because they probably are criminal. But we'll get back to that in a second, because first, I want to go back to Binance's earlier statement about mishandled customer funds. What did they mean by that? And how can a crypto exchange as big as FTX become insolvent? It's like hearing that a casino went insolvent. It's like, how did you guys lose money? You win no matter what. These crypto exchanges make money on the fees. Whether you win or not, whether it goes up or down, they're making money. So how could you have lost billions of dollars as one of the biggest crypto exchanges? That's the question. And this is where Alameda Research comes in. So as a quick explanation, SBF's empire is actually incredibly complicated. like way more complicated than even complicated firms. Like this has been compared to the Lehman Brothers. Well, the Lehman Brothers corporate structure is way simpler. SBF's web of companies is really difficult to untangle. But really, there are two companies that matter the most: Alameda Research and FTX. FTX is the crypto exchange.
And by the way, he called it research on purpose, right? This is a hedge fund, right? That is based in Bahamas, doing some kind of sketchy stuff in terms of arbitrage. And it's called Alameda Research.
We've talked about. And Alameda Research is a small trading firm. Now, these two companies, though they're technically
sounds nice and clean.
distinct
Who doesn't like
entities, have
research?
always been sort of unusually close. Some have speculated unethically close. But their CEO claims that indeed they are separate entities. But with FTX seemingly becoming insolvent, that relationship is now under scrutiny. And it turns out they may have shared more than an office. They may have shared information and also been sharing client funds. And this is where this whole mishandled client funds allegation comes in, because FTX told users that their digital assets belong to them and wouldn't be traded. It's explicitly laid out in their terms of service. Quote, you control the digital assets in your account. FTX Trading does not represent or treat digital assets in users' accounts as belonging to FTX Trading. And title to your digital assets shall at all times remain with you. But turns out this wasn't the case at all, because according to an Alameda Research employee who came to me anonymously, apparently they had more access to FTX than previously disclosed. In fact, not only did they have access to FTX's back end, they managed withdrawals for FTX and had a giant line of credit that they could draw on, which seems like partially may have been users' funds, something that no separate.
All right. You guys could what you got to say about this LAR here and then MOT? Well, no, let's start with MOT, because you know what? Like you own several companies, so you know what you can do behind the back door if you decide to do something stupid, right? And the lines you can't cross, blah blah blah. But what are your initial thoughts on Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried? The name's always funny, just like Madoff, for example. This guy is called.
It sounds like a supervillain. Sounds like a supervillain. Like you can't. It's like, what's the Joker's real name? It's like Bankman. Bankman?
Sam Bankman.
All right, so this is what this dude did. And you could do this with actually, it's kind of illegal, but you can do it. Okay, you're supposed to take out state taxes and federal taxes from people's paycheck, correct? Social Security, all that kind of stuff. You can re-leverage those funds back into the business. Guess what happens when the government come for their state tax, their federal tax, their FICO, their Medicare, and you ain't got nothing? Then they're going to start looking at the disclosure reports. If they're going to look at the disclosure reports, and you signed off on the disclosure reports that these things were separate when they clearly wasn't, now you got some double dealing going on. So now it's going to turn from tax fraud into bank fraud into mail fraud. You're going to jail for a long time. And it only happens when the things go wrong. Because when it go wrong, they do the investigation from the first beginning to the end. And you have to account for all of those quarters if you sign those financial disclosure reports. And what people don't understand, this guy right here sounded like he was double, triple dealing. He was actually re-leveraging funds in-house. One company had access to all the moves of the other company, highly illegal. And he probably made some trades, both of those things, highly illegal. But it all comes crashing down when you have the type of problem that he has, when he has nothing. When you have nothing, you're going to start getting tagged all over the place by actual lawsuits and all this stuff. And those actual lawsuits from a civil matter will turn into lawsuits in a civil matter. Because the only thing they're going to do is just go over to the civil side, get all the actual people that actually participated in the case, and just go do the federal stuff with it. This guy's in a lot of trouble. I would not want to be this guy's friend. I would not want to be a guy lent money by this guy. I would not want to be a person that's close to this dude who actually invested in this company, one thing or another. Because if you got out, and there was some people who did get out before this happened, because this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. People who actually, regulatory agencies, or actually very smart people who pay attention to this stuff can see this stuff a mile away. So you have to really understand that he's not alone in it, but he's going to be the lone person taking responsibility for it. God, I don't want to be this guy. Wow.
So LAR, you confess that you grew up in you spent some time in Chicago with some less than savory personalities, right? You know, do you know anyone like this? Or can you there's some kinds of things that I can almost relate to, and what I mean, for example, when MOT talks about it's when things go wrong, that's when it becomes a problem, right? Because there's certain things that you know that you can do, but you got to make sure you're not effing up certain other things, right? Otherwise, once that breaks, then they're all in there, and then everything comes out, you know, and you look like an idiot. But I don't know. Anyways, Elliot, any comments on the video we just watched?
I really don't want to say much because I feel like the spirit of Kanye West saying something right now because of this guy. But and I feel like Kyrie is like, shut up, don't retweet nothing.
Sam Bankman's gonna get away with it. Like his name, Bankman-Fried.
So I mean, this is just okay. So I know somewhere along the lines, somebody from Enron, Bernie Madoff, hell, Lex Luthor, Dr. Kevorkian, maybe they're cheering this man on. This is some grade A Ponzi scheme that we've ever seen. You're the youngest of the financial super villains that we have ever seen. Like, bro, like the worst part about this is, so nobody's gonna ask where the money's at. Oh, you just think it's insolvent. All of this money just evaporated. Really?
He actually he owns like about 9% of Robinhood, amongst other things. In other words, he has a lot of that money in his own personal assets. Obviously, it's not going to amount to the total of whatever, but no, he's getting liquidated for sure, amongst the other kinds of troubles that he's in. But anyways, go ahead.
I feel like Kanye. I feel like he getting liquidated because he owns 9% of Robinhood. How can he stay?
That'll bring in some change. You know, it's like he's got to sell his 9% of Robinhood.
Man,
he was living high on the hog, man. This dude was doing it.
He is definitely in the spirit of Donald Sterling. I'm gonna sell this motherfucker for way more than I got it. I tell you what, on the way out, I'm getting rich. Like, don't tell me that crime doesn't pay. Is all I'm saying. You know. But I feel like if I keep talking, I'm gonna have to do sensitivity training at the ADL because what I'm saying is anti financial medic. It's ridiculous.
So Kaizo, there's something, you know, you have referenced a couple of times about, you know, taking advantage of certain things. Sam Bankman-Fried, one of the things that he did was he noticed some arbitrage in the market. Arbitrage is basically meaning the difference in price based on, let's say, two different markets, two geographies. In this case, it was Bitcoin in Japan versus Bitcoin in the United States, right? And it's like, hey, in Japan, it's like $1,100. In the United States, it's $1,000, right? So it's like, arbitrage. How do I do this? And there were many problems along the way in terms of being able to have an account in Japan as a Japanese person, be able to do the transfer, be able to do it over a particular limit, all kinds. So he solved all those problems, and then boom, that was what Alameda Research was doing, right? And he started printing money, in the sense that he started actually making a lot of cash for himself. I just wanted to say that in the context of, obviously, there's certain things that he did right and certain things that he did wrong. So with that in mind, Kaizo, what do you have to say about the video that we watched and add the context that I added about? So he did certain things good. Like, he didn't just appear here, right? And then he started doing the shady things, which MOT described very well. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just for clarification, the arbitrage, is that a significant reason of how he made money, or?
That's kind of how he made money. He started this Alameda thing, which was like basically Alameda Research figured out a way of, in earlier days, work on the arbitrage between the price of cryptocurrencies in two different markets, right? If you can just buy one over here and sell over there, but you know, there's all kinds of regulatory and crazy things that he built a company around that to solve the problem. And that's how he really kind of got into this thing. He started off as a trader earlier on. His parents, by the way, are Stanford University law professors. So he kind of grew up here in the Bay Area, you know, comfortably. And then he was a trader at this company called Jane Street, you know, kind of top good, you know, so he doing well, and then left and found this arbitrage thing, created a little thing around it. That's kind of how he started. And then he started this FTX, which is the exchange. And then things started blowing up. You know, 2012, he made all kind of, and then he went wild on the. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Many billions, man. Just the billions kept coming in.
Wait, did you say one of the companies is called Robinhood?
No. He owns like 9% of Robinhood.
That's what I'm saying. So, it gets better and better. Your name's Bankman, and you own part of Robinhood. Like, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, and then that's what he did. He took money from one company and gave it to another one. Yeah, so I think so in the end, it's kind of interesting. He kind of fell in the same way that he rose. It's kind of ironic. So I think the issue here is take risks, catch the difference in the market. But the issue is now, are you going to get caught? Are you going to get in too much over your head? And
so do you wish to what this slight comment here on the psychoanalysis, armchair psychoanalysis of him, in the sense that I think that his ego got in the way with the Alameda research, because basically what had to happen was Alameda research had to die, along with many other things that happened with a particular, I believe, a particular coin, something that happened recently. You know, he was one of those that had to go, right? But two things. Alameda research was, you know, that was his baby and his cash cow, and that printed him a lot of money at some point. But then he fucked it up by being too risky, which is not crazy. It's a hedge fund. A hedge fund is allowed to go out of business. It would not have been illegal if he just let it die. But then he was like, if I take one, and this is speculation on my part now, but take out of this company, put it in the other company, and I may be able to trade my way out of it. Because after all, I'm Sam Bankman-Fried.
This reminds me of actually the first black bankers who were owning white banks in America. That's actually what they got indicted for. Actually, it was again, whether they did it or was a white employee who did it, it's irrelevant. But they actually got put in prison because of the same issue. Basically, using money from one bank to save the other bank and putting people's money at risk. So if he's found guilty, I mean, this shit is going to put him in prison or liquidate all his funds and give it back to the investors, whatever it is. But he dipped in too much. He got way too over his head. But the thing is, he did the same thing that he did to get rich. So meaning, yes, he was onto something.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He overestimated certain causal factors, such as will Binance actually, follow through.
Yeah, and just a word on it. Like, he was almost doing like modern in terms of the ghost behind it, the ghost in the shell, the ghost in the machine. He was counting on modern monetary politics based on some kind of situation where he wasn't going to get caught, and this money would just be created out of thin air in terms of like perceived value after all, right? If I'm making sense, and that was what was running, and this is speculation. That was kind of what was the simulation that was running in the back of his head. And he thought that he could probably ride that out, just, print, be the central bank for this particular period while he gets away with it of the cryptocurrency, whatever, and slide through, and it would have been great, and it would have been exciting and a great story to tell himself and maybe his two other co-conspirators. But anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Did he just basically big short himself? like he said, here's my company. I'm gonna get my other company, and I'm underwritten by my other company, but then I'm gonna get this other company to pay for it.
Exactly. So it was just like there was just gonna be this illusion of value, right? Because also he created this FTX token, which has value out there in the market because he's out there, billionaire marketer, in terms of putting himself out there as this kind of there's this movement called effective altruism. He was in the forefront of that. He's constantly talking about giving money away. So one of the biggest contributors, shout out to MOT, to the Democratic Party, like of all time.
This is why I love white people in America. because they could do the most outlandish. Hey, you know what? Yeah, I got a research company. That's a crypto company. That's, I'm in this other company. How the fuck? Oh, and by the way, I figured I was so cold with it, I was gonna go to another company, and they was gonna buy me, and they was gonna buy me out of the stuff that I got myself into, and then they had to be smart enough to look at the books. But I'm white. You don't trust me.
Yeah, there's a very funny thing where he was in Congress kind of giving a testimony, and he was saying about, let's say, Lehman and those other companies, right? What they did. He was saying about what they did, like, oh, creating all these different things, and nobody really knows the risk that is in all these types of packages, creating derivatives out of blah, blah, blah. It was, and then he was doing the exact same thing where he was shuffling
because none of the rules changed. None of the rules changed. There was no more laws that came on the books. Nothing. And you got to understand that pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. But when you show up with nothing, you get slaughtered instead of the pig, because they're gonna take something, and these people are gonna want their money, and the government's gonna want their cut of this actual money pool of money that they were supposed to be there, and that's what he's gonna go to jail for.
Yeah, like if he had a mine in Saudi Arabia and it was worth like $1 trillion, and he was just able to funnel that in real quick, then they would have not. You would not have heard any. No one would have heard anything.
But right? Hold up, am I wrong when I say this? Because I might be wrong. He's gonna do time. He's gonna pay fines, but he's gonna have a lot of money in his pocket by the time he gets out because he don't have to give it all back.
Well, Madoff didn't get out either.
Yeah, Madoff was the old man.
Yeah. So and trust me, this guy is gonna die within 7 years of him getting locked up.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
I know so. This is how the stuff works. Also part of the process.
No, man, he's gonna be paying people in prison with Binance. What are you talking about? Listen, man.
LAR, Pop-Tarts and like cocoa is very different than owing people millions of dollars.
Exactly. So I can if somebody gave you listen, man, they gave you what? Some ramen noodles, a couple of coffees to kill me. Listen, this is what I'm gonna do when I get out. I got you. The guards got to do this one. He can pay the inmates, and he going to federal prison. It's gonna be cushy.
No,
he's not going anywhere hard.
So trust me, he's gonna end up like that guy who was Clinton's friend with all them guards, who was also on duty. And See, you getting into Kanye territory because I know who you're talking about. I quit. I'm done. Sensitivity training once again.
So
no problem, man.
Go ahead, Dr. Thunder.
This is what this reminds me of. Not exactly the same scenario because there were not two companies involved, but I like The Office, the show The Office. So Ryan, who was going to business school, he was doing what he was supposed to do, right? There was threats that the company, Dunder Mifflin, was going to go through downsizing. And so Ryan did the smart thing. He went to business school and got himself an MBA. So then what happens is some turnover happens in the company. Jan starts acting crazy and stuff. And so you don't see it coming, but he actually is the only one that actually has the sort of credentials that would warrant him actually getting the corporate job. So he ends up getting Jan's old job. And so then he has all these ideas. So his ideas are, hey, we need to modernize. We need to do website. We need to do X, Y, and Z. So in a way to try to legitimize the website, what he did was he had all the salespeople log in their sales on the website, which was double counting the sales. And it was defrauding. It was making it appear that the company was worth more than it was. that they were more profitable than they were. And so he ended up getting arrested and went to jail. Now, some kind of goofy way, he ends up working back at Dunder Mifflin again as a salesman. But that whole scenario just reminds me of the whole fast and loose, and the whole sort of ego and pride and stuff gets involved, and you think that you'll be able to do some quick moving and some fast talking, but you run out of time, you run out of money, and you end up in prison. So anyhow,
so this is what he did. He went from juggling pennies to juggling marbles to juggling golf balls to juggling bowling balls to juggling wrecking balls. Wrecking balls is something that he's not going to be able to juggle.
Yep.
They're going to toss it his way, and it's over. This is the wrecking ball you're trying to juggle.
Let me play a little bit more of this, and then we'll kind of get to wrapping up on what we've looked at today. Because, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you everybody, by the way, for participating and the super chats and all that kind of good stuff here. Don't forget to click the like button. Okay, 11,000 people laid off on Facebook. 24% of certain other tech companies, 24% of their employees, okay, getting cut off. This is part of the cycle of tightening that happens when you have to wash off all the excess stuff that was speculated when money was cheap. When interest rates are effectively zero, people go in there and they tell you, hey, I'm going to grow X, Y, and Z, so give me money. And everyone is incentivized to give money. Cash is trash when the interest rates are basically zero. So it says invest. Venture capitalists are giving money. Everyone is giving money. Maybe there's also some stimulus going on. And by the way, this is an important thing in terms of, generally speaking, for the next couple of years, given the fact that the mandate is to keep inflation down, there's not going to be as much stimulus, okay, going into this particular downturn that we're going, right? Because inflation is still high, interest rates are up, blah, blah, blah. That's just a speculation on my part anyways. Shout out to, I just think I saw another super chat or something of that nature.
Gail at night.
Shout out to Gail at night showing support there. That is $5 whole. And it's a purple person with a blue beanie on type sticker happening.
And wow.
In the building. Okay, so let's play a little bit more of this.
Entity would normally have. Now, bear in mind, that is coming from one employee, but it's backed up by another source, the Wall Street Journal, who reported that FTX extended loans to Alameda using money that customers had deposited on the exchange for trading purposes, which they just said they wouldn't do. Quote, it was a decision that Mr. Bankman-Fried described as a poor judgment call. But I would disagree with Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried. I would not describe that as a poor judgment call. A poor judgment call is showing up to a Zoom meeting looking like this. When you take clients' funds and do exactly what you told them you would not do with them, that's theft, and that is fraud. Now, I know this is already all insane, but we've only explained sort of half the story, how clients' funds were being used by Alameda. But how were they lost? Because new reports show that Alameda may owe
where's the money,
FTX $10 billion. How did they lose that $10 billion? Because these were supposed to be the crypto geniuses, right? Well, this is unfortunately where we have to kind of get a mix of facts and speculation. As I said, I'm going to tell you guys what we're sure about, what we're not. So losses likely come from 4 places that I've heard about. Number one is just FTX themselves spending insane amounts on advertising with stadiums, Tom Brady, and a crazy number of YouTube influencers who apparently were shilling FTX. The second place they likely lost money was that Alameda invested heavily into FTT tokens and a lot of their own projects, which when FTX went down,
they use one company to prop up the stock of the other company.
Basically went to zero, or at minimum couldn't be sold very quickly. The third way they lost money was that Sam Bankman-Fried tried to bail out all of crypto in the summer. People like BlockFi.
He tried to pull a JP Morgan.
Voyager Digital, Skybridge Capital, which led to huge losses. And then when Alameda found itself with big losses around the time of a lot of these companies.
Because JP Morgan bailed out. Yeah, he was doing this whole kind of soft power publicity campaign where he
collapse. Number 4, Alameda took out a $4 billion line of credit from FTX.
$4 billion from the other company. Like, how you borrow $4 billion from yourself? That's great.
$1 billion loan, essentially. And what did they give FTX in return to back up this money? FTT tokens.
And I'll give you some fake stuff to back up the fact that I just got $4 billion. It's like it's infinite regression. It's brilliant.
And Robinhood shares. Guys, which the FTT tokens is the crazy part because FTX, that's their token. So it's basically giving nothing. This is all according to Reuters. And it's just insane. Many financial commentators are calling this dark magic, but I think Matt Levine of Bloomberg put it best. He says it's possibly illegal and it's like a bank lending a lot of money against its own stock. The problem obviously being that if you face a liquidity crunch or people lose confidence in you, then these FTT tokens go to zero and now your clients aren't backed. So it's extremely risky behavior at the best. And like he said, possibly illegal. I'd say probably illegal. So it was this incestuous relationship between FTX and Alameda that led to their downfall. And while we don't know the full extent of their losses and what is just, they can't find the liquidity right now, estimates right now are going from billions to $10 billion at the highest I've seen, which is just wild. And I feel so bad for the victims here. But I find the
By the way, this is old because there's another company called BlockFi, which he kind of bailed out. BlockFi has also gone. Well, go ahead.
Do you notice that basically they letting this guy off the hook? Because basically he just said, oh yeah, he took the money and gave the money to himself, and then said he gave the money to himself again, but he lost the money.
Oh, so you're saying we still don't? Oh, they will find out though. Here's the thing. I think MOT is saying, like, he's juggling with these crazy wrecking balls. He's gonna get hit. He doesn't have anything. He's gonna have to go down. They're gonna make an example out of him. That type of
5
thing.
years. 5 years he's got to be locked up. 5 years.
They will go in there because they're frozen all the companies.
Time out. Yeah. You see what you just said, MOT? He'll be locked up for how many?
No. In 5 years, the case will start and he'll be unalive in 7.
Oh no! What is the white guy that was with Enron and he mysteriously died before the trial? But everybody.
Ken Lay.
So he gonna get a BBL and be trained and get some boobs, and then he changed his face and he disappeared, and magically winds up a female billionaire somewhere on the other side of the planet. This is.
I mean, we do have witness protection program, and it's not really hard to make one of those civilianized. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
How difficult is it? How easy is it for a white guy who's a billionaire to disappear in 5 years? Seriously.
Yeah, but all of his assets will be frozen though.
No, they won't.
Yeah. But
that we know of. That we know of.
Yeah,
that
we know of. That's
Exactly.
right. That's right.
He got parents.
So the Cayman, the accounts, he'll still be able to access those.
So yeah, that's an interesting thing too. Also, because if I think I understand this guy, he's gonna be the type that would have thought like, okay, if this crazy spin move I'm about to do right now doesn't work, because he's a trader, right? And I think he would not have been this successful if he doesn't hedge, right? So he probably has some kind of escape route money or some tucked under some rock somewhere or something, right? It just makes sense that he would,
Watch this. Today in the news, Sam Bankman-Fried died in a mysterious fishing accident in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right before trial.
That he was supposed to go to jail for embezzling billions of dollars. Well, it was shark-infested water, so they figure there's nothing left.
They found his
and
foot.
I guess we'll just have to let it go.
Yeah, back to you, Bob. Back to you, Bob. No further questions.
He died of affluenza.
Okay. All right.
Well, yes, indeed. So this is something else that is kind of going on, and the waves are not going to be done yet. And by the way, if we start bringing it back to the topic here, and I'm going to ask for your closing thoughts and whatnot. You see, when the tides recede, that's when you see whom is swimming without underwear. That's what Warren Buffett says, right? So when it's time for the free money to leave, then all the crazy speculations that you were doing when you could just raise funds from thin air and money was flowing from all kinds of sources and everybody was throwing billions at each other, right? Then you can do certain types of moves. This, along with the other dominoes that are going to fall that would look exactly like this, and perhaps within the cryptocurrency, and maybe we'll see it happen in some other aspects, maybe like the housing market, because we know those people leaving Facebook with their boxes, their hypothetical boxes. It's kind of funny how that's still the image of, shout out to the image in the back here, where no one has any freaking boxes that they carry out of the freaking.
Right.
I got laid off. Here's a box.
Hey, you know
Anyway,
what happened to me with MCI WorldCom, man? They rolled in there with the sheriff department, and they were just setting bucks down, and they're setting bucks down with a check, and you had to get out the office. 5
interesting.
minutes.
They gave you a box. That's different.
Yes.
That's a different level of getting laid off. It's like, here's the fucking box. Okay.
Yeah. Here's the box. You got about 3 minutes, and all these people with military firearms are going to escort you out of the building. That's it.
That's the way to go. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, MOT, what are your kind of like your closing thoughts on this? Okay, we've talked about the fact that there've been layoffs and the fact that this represents just the tip of the spear, and we talked about the logic of these particular kind of cycles, right? The tip of the spear of the cycle in this case is going to come from the tech sector, going to bleed all the way through. If you follow through everything, from the, as I said, both the granola person and the point of sale people, and obviously the housing market is going to slow down. Credit's going to go up, savings is going to go down, all those types of things. Type of recession. What are your general closing thoughts?
I mean, you got two ways out of this, and you're taking it from a person who's been homeless twice because I refuse to follow these rules. It is better to skill up when you have time than it is to try to skill up when you don't have time. That's the wrong time to try to skill up. That's the wrong time to pay attention to trends. That's the wrong time to pay attention to everything that's going on with your industry. You got to start knowing how your industry works, because the actual money is to be made in the process, not showing up to work. Anybody can show up to work, anybody can replace you. But as long as you have an operations manager level understanding of your career field, you could duck out of this stuff. You could be under your own 1099 process, and you could be making the same amount of money.
So operations manager, meaning,
Yes.
that level, where does the money come in? How does it go out? What
Correct.
are our assets type stuff? How much runway do we have? If you have to have that kind of understanding about whichever field you're in. Go ahead.
Correct. And every field has this, except for like basic customer service. But everything else has this type of process associated with it. And you have to be able to understand that people who have foresight and who have prepared for these types of situations don't have to worry about layoffs, because they already have 3 people that they can always go to for another job halfway across the country. You just unplug here, plug in somewhere else. You be fired on a Friday, you take 2 weeks off. Next thing you know, on Monday morning, you're starting another job.
Because you got those skills. Yeah, like I always got it's interesting, like because with these oil engineering jobs in Alaska for certain type of oil outfits and stuff like that, where they're like, hey, contract basis, here's a bunch of cash type stuff. That, anyways, those type of moves are always kind of available if you have the skill, and you got a TWIC card, ain't that right, MOT? But anyways,
yes. Everything loaded up to the gills if it's ever needed. Somebody call me for anything other than heavy haul. I'm your guy. I got somebody who can do it.
Yeah, stay loaded up with all the certifications. Anyways, LAR, what are your kind of closing thoughts here on this general economy and Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried?
I think that scamming is going to be at an all-time high with all of these unemployed tech workers. That's what I think. Thank you. But your bank card is not safe, folks. Maybe you can trade it for some FTT tokens when you run out of money. That's what I think. But that's it.
Indeed. Nicely put there. And then shout out to Kaizo. Your closing thoughts about everything that we've discussed. How would you put a bow on it? What would you like to say? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll say that always look in the future. Always look beyond your current situation, good or bad, and always be prepared for a landing. This guy probably has money stacked up in several different countries, several different banks that's not related to him, but he has access to it. especially if it's a crypto game. Of course, he has crypto wallets all around the world that he could easily liquidate. So if
Houses
that's the
fully
case,
paid off that nobody
Yeah.
knows of that are
Mhm.
in Croatia somewhere.
Exactly, and also, in like some secluded area where his identity doesn't have to be revealed. Also, probably he's worked on some pseudo good makeup. He's probably got a whole
Hmm.
setup of things to make sure that he's okay, right? So if that's the case, in that sort of situation, especially if you're going to play this difficult thing known as life, life is difficult. So if you're going to play life, make sure you're also prepared because a simple example is um, I had a friend who got himself into a criminal case. If he didn't have enough money stacked up to actually pay for the bail, he would be in jail. So, just always be prepared. In terms of this whole economic recession, some countries are worse, like the UK, etc. America is still bad. Good thing about the dollar, at least it's the world reserve currency. So cash is king. Right now, the dollar has increased. It's one of the few currencies next to the ruble that's actually increased in value. So if that's the case, keep the cash. Make sure you can keep something liquid that you can use in these tough times. But again, always look beyond current circumstance.
Yeah, because almost a 50% increase in the value, like $1 to 10 CDs went from $1 to 15 CDs, and it was a good opportunity to cop some extra plots of land and stuff like that in this particular kind of go around here. So there's always there are ways to play the game. The right now when cash is expensive is when you have to hold cash, or you have to see. You may have like steady paychecks, or shall we say invoices in the books as far as people that are going to pay you. View that cash very preciously and try to cut down expenses and obligations. As MOT was saying too, even before you get into these things, you have to think, well, can I slide out of this lease? Can I do this? Can I cut that? Right? And so on and so forth. Now, Dr. Thunder, what are your closing thoughts here on all this good stuff?
Yeah, it just makes me reflect back at about the pandemic, and I think there were a lot of people that took it as an opportunity to reinvent themselves, to gain new skills. Um, basically, my conversation skills and my interest in having sort of thought provoking conversations, that was always there. But as far as doing it online with a certain kind of regularity, that's what changed when the pandemic hit. So I could either use the pandemic as a way to, just keep doing the same things and hope for the best. Or I could say, okay, what are some ways that I can protect myself from, you know, from economic downturn? So one of the things that I did to protect myself was I I started offering online lessons. Now, I actually had that set up prior to the pandemic, and I've noticed that people that already had sort of a presence online, they did far better than people that just had tried to just make it out of nothing. So I was in the right place and had the right kind of expertise to be able to transition. You can't just make magically stuff just start working. And you have to be patient because stuff takes longer than you think it will, and it always costs more than you think it will. So I just decided, hey, I'm going to use this to transition in this way, and it's working out really well because it's actually provided a larger platform for me to do and share, the other stuff that I do, the music stuff, for instance. So a lot of folks from the sort of communities that follow me in the kind of stuff that I say that also come and support the music stuff that I'm doing. Right. So I sort of found a different market to, to expose to my music, now I could have just sat around and been like, well, it just ain't going to work. It's over or whatever, or just hope that the same stuff was going to reappear. But the same stuff that existed prior to the pandemic has not really reappeared. Everything has really become quite a bit different. And those folks that don't have some sort of online presence are not in a position to be able to protect themselves for when the next thing happens. So you got to learn from, the situations you find yourself in. You got to learn from it. Yeah. So I mean, I think this is a good show. Hopefully, folks, take this as an opportunity to consider some things that maybe they've wanted to do and start skilling up, start gaining some skills in those other areas. Kaizo was talking about programming. I mean, if you want to do the work or not to become a good programmer, what is this 2.5 hours a day for 5 months, 6 months, whatever it was that he was saying for JavaScript. I mean, I'll tell you just like my dad told me. He says you can work now or you can work later, and it's always what it is. You can either work now or work later. Working now is better because you're younger now than you will be later, and so you have more energy, and your time is less encumbered now than it will be in the future. Your time will always be more encumbered. You'll always have less free time. You always have less energy. Your body, in the stuff that's on us, that's wearing down, that stuff is always going to keep getting worse. So you can either do it now or do it later. But the thing is that 5 years from now or 5 months from now, let's use that illustration Kaizo was saying, you could either have your programming, you could either know how to program and be able to transition into something that is less sort of volatile, right? Because when stuff changes, they're always going to need programmers, right? You can either do that, or in 5 months, you're still in the same place and you don't have it. But 5 months is still going to pass. The 5 months is that's going to happen anyway. So you can either do something with it, or you can sit around and do nothing, complain about it, hope that everything is going to be okay. And I'm sorry, it's not going to be okay. It's going to be worse in 5 months than it is now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very nice. Very nice. Good way of landing the plane there. 4 p.m. Eastern time every Sunday. Next Sunday, it's going to be on your channel, right, Dr. Thunder? You're going to be able to do that? Cool.
Yeah.
That's case closed. No. And obviously, check us out. Getting Ish Done Wednesday. That is 6:30. Right. 6:30 Pacific time.
Yeah. And I've got a new show that's on Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Called Two Lames React, right? You and that. You and the other lame.
Two Dads React. But Two Lames was on that. That was one of the things we were considering. But Two Dads React, and it's my buddy. He's got a big YouTube platform called God Rules. He's got about 400K subs on there, and he's got some other channels, but he doesn't do very much live streaming. And so we'll be live streaming the program on my channel, and he's going to clip the program and put it on his channel. So, but his content tends to be sort of on the verge of sort of conspiracy. And so it's pretty interesting kind of discussions that we have. We're been best friends since we were kids. We grew up together and stuff like that. So we have a lot of history, a lot of stuff that we can go. And so anyhow, so that's going to be on Tuesdays. Then of course Thursdays I've got Thunder's Thoughts, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm looking to have Black Ram 313 as the co-host there. I need to firm that up, but that's looking like that's like the likely scenario. And but yeah, lots of good stuff happening, and please stay tuned.
Lots of good stuff are going on. Shout out to Gail, always holding it down. Shout out to D, checking for you. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to those also whom super chatted. I believe again, Gail and Dottie Gail, Just Call Me Brian, and all that other good stuff.
Solo TV 84.
Solo TV
Yeah, here's the first one.
He was the first one. Yes. Thank you very much. And yeah, shout out to the panelists, LAR, Kaizo, gone now, MOT, always welcome, Dr. Thunder, and peace. We're out.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.